Hello, good morning, welcome. Thank you for joining me. It's nice and early, so I guess I'm going to go easy on you. My name's Carlton Gibson. I'm one of your friendly Django fellows, and I help maintain various packages in the Django ecosystem on top of that. I'm Carlton Gibson on GitHub and Twitter, and you can find me there. I'll just say a word about the Django Fellowship Program. There are currently two fellows, there's Marish and I, and we're contracted by the Django Software Foundation, the DSF, to do the day-to-day running of the framework. We handle ticket triage, we do patch review, we handle security of issues, we do the releases, that kind of thing. We're having awesome contributors, but it's the kind of stuff that on a project side of Django's, it just wouldn't get done. So if you depend on Django, or if your company depends on Django, you should definitely make sure you have an individual, or better yet, a corporate sponsorship of the DSF. You make a small contribution to help ensure the sustainability of the framework that you built your business on. Having said that, when I'm not on GitHub, I do a podcast with my co-host Will Vincent called Django Chat. Essentially, we have various guests from the community and we chat about Django. We're coming up for 100 episodes there. So if you haven't already, grab a listen of that. And finally here, then over the last little while, I've been not so secretly pottering on a little side project called Button. It's at btn.dev. They tell me that no vowels are cool, so BTN. The tagline for Button is a simpler deployment story. It's how you get your Django app online if you're not, and perhaps you have absolutely no desire to be an infrastructure engineer. That's coming this summer, so go and drop your email in the box there if that's of interest to you. Right, talk today is about dynamic static sites with Django and Sphinx. It's about how you can use Sphinx to manage certainly part of the content of your Django-based website. We're at DjangoCon, right? So I can probably let the Django bit go for a moment, but Sphinx, the documentation builder? The answer is yes. Like, we know Sphinx is a great tool for building docs, right? The Django docs, the Python docs, they're built with Sphinx. And all that awesome cross-linking you get in the Django docs that take you from right where you are to right where you need to be, that's all managed by Sphinx, right? You simply can't maintain hyperlinks like that at any scale. But Sphinx, it lets you define targets, it keeps track of them for you, and it lets you know if any of them are broken, and then it compiles them all up with the right URL when you build your docs. So Sphinx is basically what makes documentations like Django's or like Python's possible, right? And as a quick aside, like cross-linking like that, one of the best features of Sphinx is only one of its super powerful features. So we know that Sphinx is great, but Sphinx is also great for building static sites. When you install Sphinx, you get a command, Sphinx Quick Start, and you run that and it answers the question, what's your project called, etc. And then it gives you a makefile. And you run that makefile, you run make HTML, and what it does is it builds a folder full of HTML files. It builds a static site, right? You point your web server at that and your job done. So given that it's just building a static site of docs, you can use that to build your website as well. Right? Now, I don't want to spend too long talking about using Sphinx for building static sites, because this is Django time. We want to talk about Django, but Paul Everett of JetBrains has done an awesome job of promoting Sphinx for building static sites. He's got a talk that he's given a few times, and you can find it online. He's given it at PyCon APAC 2020 and just recently at PyCon US 2021. And there's also a tutorial on the PyCharm website about using Sphinx to build your static site. So rather than me go into all that detail and do it not as well as Paul, you can go and check out those resources. One thing I do want to talk about, though, before we go on, is Markdown, right? Because if I were to say to you that, you know, you should use Sphinx to build your website, then I'm going to lose 70% of you instantly, because you're going to say something like, but Sphinx uses restructured text and I can't use that, I have to use Markdown. Now, maybe you personally wouldn't say that, but history shows that probably a plurality of Python users would. Markdown and RST are almost identical for me. You write your paragraphs, you write your headers, they're a teeny bit different, but okay, they're basically the same, but it's the links, right? With Markdown, nobody can remember the synctans. Is it square bracket followed by round brackets? Is it round brackets followed by square brackets? Nobody knows. And then restructured text has got its own version of links. They've both got inline links where you put the URL next to the anchor text, and they've both got these reference links where you define a name and then you put that down. That's a bit more effort, but it's probably easier to maintain. But then restructured text has got these crazy anonymous versions which just blow everyone's mind. It's too much, right? And people are averse to restructured text. Now, I think it's worth learning both, but just as a matter of historical record, the need to use restructured text, I think, has clearly put people off using Sphinx. So we'd rather spend time learning another static site builder, or switching between static site builders looking for the features, or even writing our own static site builder, which is a great, that's always a bit of fun, right? rather than learning this extra restructured text syntax. Now that seems kind of silly, but it's the reality of how we feel about it as developers. You know, I've been there, you've been there. If only we could somehow use Markdown whilst continuing to get the power of Sphinx. Well, we can. The wonderful people at a project called the Executable Book Project, now I'm just going to look that up later on, they've developed a parser called Mist, which is a Markdown parser for Sphinx. It's at mist-parser, read the docs.com. I'll put a link up in a minute. Mist does two things, right? First of all, it passes Markdown, not restructured text, but Markdown into the internal representation used by Sphinx. And then it adds extensions to Markdown, which are all basically variants of the fenced code block syntax that you'll be familiar with from GitHub, for all the extra roles and directives that give links its power, so that you can do the cross-linking and the admonitions and the call-outs and so on. The promise with Mist is that you can use Markdown and still have all the power of Sphinx. And it works, and it's awesome, right? So Mist is really easy to use. First of all, you just install it from PyPI, pip install Mist parser. And then in your Sphinx configuration, you just add the Mist parser extension. Look at that, invisible water. And once you've enabled that extension, you can then use restructured text and Markdown files, or, you know, either or. You can mix and match if you want to, but you can use Markdown with your Sphinx project. So with Mist in play, you can use Sphinx to build your static site. There's no reason not to, right? Sphinx is a truly powerful static site builder, and you should go and check out those videos of Paul's to look into the full details of that. But this is DjangoCon. We're interested in Django. What about dynamic sites, right? What happens if I need, say, authentication or other cool things like per user customization or forms, or, you know, interactivity in general? What am I going to do? Put it in an iframe? No, I'm not, right? So at that point, you start going away from static sites and you start building your Django project, and you start throwing stuff in the database. And then that leads you inevitably, well, you think, well, what about a CMS? Because I don't want to build all this content management myself. I need a system. And Django has plenty of options there. It's got the big hitters like Wagtail and Django CMS, and then more lightweight options like Fine CMS, which perhaps stick closer to, you know, raw Django. Those are all great. They're all brilliant. CMSs are wonderful, right? But I might be sitting there using the fancy editor in the browser, and I might be thinking, you know, but what about my editor? I like my editor. I'm used to my editor. I've got the color scheme just so. I'm not sure I really like editing in this browser window, however fancy that might be. I might be thinking, well, what about Git? Right? I like Git. Sometimes it's overly complex, right? We'll grant that. But the history, the diffs, the power of version control, pull requests, like all of these things, that's not something I want to give up, right? I might be thinking, but what about Sphinx? What about all its goodness? What about that cross-linking, the admonition, the tables of contents, all the rest of it? I really wanted that power for a certain kind of audience, for a certain kind of work. And what's the kind of work? It's like anything that involves extended writing, right? For that kind of workflow, the file-based version control, lightweight markup language-based workflow, it's pretty much unbeatable. Now, don't get me wrong. There are many people, many tasks, many workflows for which a CMS is clearly the right way to go. But where we do want that kind of static site workflow, wouldn't it be nice if we could leverage the power of Sphinx for creating and compiling our content, but somehow render that into a machine-readable format that we could then leverage in our Django application? Well, of course, we can. Sphinx has this concept of builders, right? So a builder takes the in-memory content of your site and it renders it into a specific format. So when you type make HTML using the make file, it's the HTML builder that's responsible for the final output of your files. But Sphinx has many builders. There are builders for EPUB. There are builders for PDF. There are builders for Unix man pages, for Apple helpbooks, for Noseke, for everything, right? This is another awesome feature of Sphinx that, you know, not only can you build your static site or your documentation, you can output an EPUB too, right? But crucially for us, there's a builder for JSON. the JSON builder that renders each page of the page sections as HTML, but it wraps those into a JSON structure that you can then access the parts of. So this is exactly what the Django docs do, right? We write the Django docs in restructured text using Sphinx. Then they're rendered into HTML in JSON using the JSON builder. And when you request a page, Django then loads the correct JSON and renders that using the Django templating language. And for me, that's the exact workflow I'm looking for. There's no way that I'm going to go back to not using Sphinx, but at the same time, I've got to have Django. So when I come to think, oh, okay, I'll start putting some more content onto my own personal site, or when I want to work on the guide component of the button, it's this pattern that I want to leverage. Okay, now this results in a package that I've called Django Sphinx View. It lets you serve your Sphinx built docs with Django. It's still an early version, but it's really small in scope, and I'm actively using it. So I'm say, yeah, come along, join in, use it. Let me walk you through it. The first thing you do with Django Sphinx View is you install it from pip. So pip install Django Sphinx View, easy peasy. Then you add it to your installed apps for template discovery. And that's the setup, pretty standard stuff. And the basic usage is just to import the documentation view class from Sphinx View into your URL conf and then route the view. So this would be in your URL conf. Let's zoom into that middle section because it's a bit small on the slide. Look at the path here. The docs bit there, the docs bit of the string there, that's the prefix you want to route the docs under. So that's like the folder you want to put them in. And then you use this path part. This is a mouthful. You're defining a path keyword argument for the view called path using the path converter. There's too many paths there, right? So we have a keyword arg for the path. We use the path converter to capture everything after the docs that comes in the URL. And then the documentation view uses that path to know which is the correct JSON document to serve. The JSON build there argument here is a path to where you've put your output from the Sphinx builder. So I have I put this in a setting, and I have one for local and one for production. Local is just the build there inside my development project, and the production is just wherever I put it on the server. The base template name is how you tie the Sphinx docs into your site's design. You need to provide a base template with title, doc, table of content blocks, and so on. And Django Sphinx View then has its own template that extends your base template, and it injects the Sphinx rendered content. Also here, you could pass a template name if you wanted to customize that last bit, if you just wanted to use your own template entirely. So have a look, that then serves. That's it. Hey presto, way. This is Django Sphinx View serving its own docs. That's the basics. Fine. So customizing. If you want to customize this, what would you do? Django Sphinx View's documentation view is a Django template view subclass. So you can customize this as you would any Django view. And there's two things that come to mind that you might want to do. One is auth. For buttons guide component, I want to restrict access to logged in users. So I subclass and I add the usual access mix-in based stuff. It require login, right? I want to have sections. Maybe I want to have sections. I'm not sure, but I might want to have sections which aren't available to free accounts. They're only, if you've actually paid, can you access those? So in that case, I'd want to use user passes tests. And you might want to put up, say, docs, which are only for staff, or you might want to have members of a particular group that can access these docs. And so all of that can be done with Django's normal access controls. And then the other clear thing you might want to do for customization is if your base template has got other things going on. So you might have, I don't know, profile data or a news feed, or I don't know, anything. What is it that your site adds in to almost every view? Well, you can put that in. And for that, because documentation view is a template view subclass, you can override get context data, call super, and that will give you the doc with the JSON populate, the doc with the JSON data populated in the context, and then you can add whatever extras you need, right? And then I think those two extension points really cover the main cases, kind of authentication and then custom extras in your template. So let's talk about continuous deployment, right? Because we might as well add that. And this is where I think this kind of approach really shines, right? There are a million ways you could do this, but the basic outline is you build the docs and then you put them online. So we're using Git, so let's just use GitHub Actions. I'll show you some snippets from the workflow file. You can check out the whole thing on the repo that's there, and you can just, adapt that to your own need. So first of all, we build the docs. Let's have a look. So these are just two of the steps from the workflow. As I say, it's in the repo. The full file is in the workflow file there. You can just look at it. But we install the dependencies, pip, install, upgrade pip. I do that because I don't like it when pip shouts at me if it's not updated. So we'll update pip. And then we install Sphinx and the all-important mist parser. Okay. And then we just, from the docs.dir, we just use the make file to make the JSON. And that builds the output. You don't have to use the make file, but it's simpler than the actual Sphinx command. And then we've got to upload it. So here we are, we're just using rsync. The gray dots here, they're just a few options that didn't fit onto the slide. Again, the full example is just in the repo. You can go and get that. But all that's in those little gray dots are a couple of rsync options to begin with, and then the SSH details and the target location. And for those last ones, we use repo secrets. So GitHub lets you enter these secrets, and then you can just access them from the workflow run. And that's it, job done, right? We set the workflow up to only run on an update to main. And each time we commit a change there, or we merge a pull request, the docs are automatically built and then they're updated live. Now, you don't have to use rsync. You can do anything you want with the files, right? I'm nostalgic, so I'm basically never going to turn down an opportunity to use rsync, but you do what you like. And that's kind of it, actually. That's Django Sphinx view. What's the roadmap for it? The main view is done, right? There'll be edge cases like it doesn't work if I do this, or so, okay, we'll add tests and we'll fix those. I imagine small adjustments like that, but nothing beyond that. So even though it's a young project, if you want to jump on and use it, then that's great. One goal I do have is that Sphinx has this concept of a template bridge. Now, what that would allow you to do is plug the Django template engine into the HTML builder, so that if you wanted to output your docs as, or your site as HTML, you could use the make HTML command, the HTML builder, to do that. That would kind of complete the circle. Like, I don't know, it's a nice extra. That's the sort of only extra goal. And then beyond that, I have one non-goal, which I'm not looking to add a whole load of themes and things like that. There is a whole world of Sphinx, God, that's a mouthful, Sphinx themes out there. You can, there's all sorts. You can go and browse those and search for them. There's galleries of them. I don't want to do that. The goal for Django Sphinx View is about integrating Sphinx built docs into your own Django site. So you bring the styling with your site, your own site's Django theme. So themes aren't something that I want to add to the repo. So that's Django Sphinx View. That's how you can build dynamic static sites with Django and Sphinx. Again, I'm Carlton Gibson. I'm your friendly Django fellow. I'm Carlton Gibson at GitHub and Twitter. You can find me there. If you haven't listened already, do check the podcast at DjangoChat.com. If simpler deployments sound like your thing, then take a look at Button at btn.dev. That's rolling out this summer again. Thanks for joining me. That's it for Django Sphinx View, right? I hope you enjoyed the talk. I hope the next time you're building a content-based site, you'll consider adding Django Sphinx View to your arsenal, right? I'll be around for the rest of the conference. And if you've got any questions, do let me know. I'd love to chat. Also, if you want to hop onto the repo, there's discussions and issues, even if you need that available there. Thanks.
Thank you, Carlton. Great talk. People can join you in a face-to-face meeting. You can just follow the link below. It's a
okay.
call. And
let me just pull it up
with you. Thank you.
No worries.
Okay. Thank you, Carlton, again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Just trying to get there. I'm going to leave this one now, okay?
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Nice talk.
Was it good? I was a bit nervous. I was a bit like, is it too short?
Yes, it's good. I had no clue we do this for Django using JSON.
Yeah, no, that's it. I was like, how long, you know, because okay, so this is the backstory. I was like, I want to use it. I want to use Sphinx. I want to serve it with Django. I'm like, how on earth is Django do it? So, you know, go digging around in the djangoproject.com source code. Oh, that's quite interesting. So, but nobody wants to do that. So I thought I'd wrap it up in a nice file and then making it kind of so it's one thing to put it in your own repo where it's nice and private, and then another thing to sanitize it to actually put it on GitHub. That's taken me much longer than I thought to get not as far as I wanted, because obviously it has to be clean. Go on, speak, whoever wishes to speak. Do I have to drive it? No.
I'm sorry, I was muted. I was saying good morning to you.
So,
Thank you for being with us.
I had to drive it when I was doing the talk yesterday because there isn't a moderator for this. And that was
Right, okay.
Yeah. The question I had was, wow, there's a big, spectacular echo. I don't know where that's coming from.
That's been me. Oh, no. Hang on, if I'm going to do strategic muting because it's me, because I haven't got headphones on because I was doing a presentation and you can't do a presentation with headphones.
All right, okay. So the question I was going to ask was, if this looks a lot like something I might be able to use for, I don't know, like a blog or something, as well as other things. Like, what does, I suppose the question I probably want to have is, if I wanted to do something like this and build something like a small site, for example, is this what's powering Nominals, your existing personal site? Because I'm curious about where that might fit in, or if it does fit in at all.
Yes, it does. Okay, so it's powering bits of it. Like, so I've had that site going from, like, you know, for about, it's the same code base from a long time ago, and so it's, you know, it's got all the nice craft that you would imagine from that. But like the notes section is using Django Sphinx view now. It was using the prototype of it, the sort of private prototype. It's now using that, and I've put the Django Sphinx view docs on it, so I'm using that. The homepage itself, for what the homepage is worth, is just a template view, and there's a few other pages which are just template views, and then there's some other bits that I use for, you know, managing my own life, which are there. But I intend to use this for basically as much as I can, because having been fellowing for 3 years now or something, I've just got addicted to Sphinx. I can't go back to not using Sphinx. So this is kind of like a compulsion now, and it's really simple. It's just one view. It's just so simple. There's nothing to it, and so it's not, you know, it's not a big thing. The only thing I want to add is this template bridge to sort of complete the circle. But beyond that, yeah, you could use that, and then really Paul's talks that I linked to, that I mentioned, do look those up, because he's got all sorts of details about using Sphinx to generate your static site. And there are people who there's a blogging thing that's, you can use, you know, that's actually set up to do blogs in Sphinx. You can use that, and then you could serve it with Django, no problem.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have a question, Carlton.
Yeah. Go on and shoot.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
It's such a lovely project. I really like it. I was wondering if it's possible to have a workflow where content could be edited either through a Django CMS like Wagtail, or using Markdown, let's say on GitHub. So let's say you could accept pull requests on GitHub, and you could also have like internal users who are not very tech savvy to use a Django-based CMS. So I wonder if that workflow could be supported, because this seems like it's rendering through Django, and I'm wondering if it could be like, you know, also editing through either of these options.
Good question. I would imagine that you'd want to use Git as the source of truth there, and so I could imagine somebody building a Django editing thing that sits on top of, you know, when you hit the submit button and it validates the form valid function. What does that do? It writes a Git commit. You know, it's the sort of thing that you've seen Simon Willison doing, you know, left, right, and center with, you know, Git everything. That would so be doable. It's not something I'm going to be doing, but.
Thank you, Carlton.
No, thank you. Anyone?
Hi, Carlton. Thanks. That looks really interesting, and I think it solves a whole number of problems that people typically find themselves picking up much heavier tools to solve. This looks really lightweight. I wonder if you've encountered the limits of this, or the places where you think, okay, that's as far as I'm going to go with this, and now sadly I need to take the extra step and invest in the heavier machinery.
I think for me on my personal projects, no, because I'm looking at writing technical documentation. I mean, you know, the main focus of it is the guide for the button app that I'm developing. And so that's right in Sphinx's sweet spot. There's two things that I have looked into: Sphinx extension. So once you start wanting to add like better, I don't know, interactivity, or better, you want to a little bit of JavaScript in your Sphinx page, well, you can write a Sphinx extension that adds that, and that's kind of cool and that's easy to do. And there's a rich ecosystem of that, so that's great. I think where this really fails is where you try and apply it to non-technical audiences. So, you know, like real human beings, like non-programmers, non-technical people, because literally that requirement to format a link a syntax, you know, be it Markdown, be it RST, that kind of, even though it's a minimal Markdown for us, that's just not feasible for an awful lot of people, because they just don't think in the right way. They don't have the right mental model or whatever, or the right experiences. And at that point, I think the form-based CMS controlled environment is the way forward. And that's why I guess Dan's question comes back, is like, could you have the best of both worlds? I don't know. I mean, those would be my initial thoughts, Daniel.
So do we just pop in and talk?
Yeah, you're on.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I was going to reply to you because what I end up doing is when I have a Django project, typically this needs a few flat pages, as we call them in Django, but flat pages are they're just not powerful enough, and I end up for every Django project, for many Django projects, I end up installing a WordPress site which accompanies my main site. So that's the problem, however, because there are these non-technical users typically. So if you have non-technical users, you have to do it some other way, I'm afraid. You're muted.
Just nearly clicked the wrong button and nearly kicked you out for asking a really good question. Sorry, that's why I panicked. Yeah, I mean, I think that I think, you know, what would I do in that case? I'd add in, you know, either Wagtail or Find CMS or Django CMS. You know, one of the options. And the sort of the issue you have then is that there's such a big step up. You know, what do I do on my own personal site? I just create a template view and I just budge it together, and I'm happy budgeting it together. But that's not a real solution, right? That's certainly not something you could present to a client. So then you've got to bring in the CMS, and there's, you know, define your pages and the hierarchy. You know, there's labor to that. So I mean, I certainly know in the Wagtail world, there's the Code Red CMS, which is set up to, you know, get you out of the blocks very quickly. That's like an add-on to Wagtail, and there's another one for blogging, which, you know, gets you out very quickly with a Wagtail blog. I guess the solution is for us in the Django community to have a compelling story we go to instead of having to go to WordPress, right? Why is it that 15, 20 years later, we're still, oh yeah, I installed WordPress alongside, rather than I use this Django solution? I think that's something that's the question for the Django community. Is like, as Django developers, we shouldn't be bolting on WordPress, we should be bolting on a Django solution. I don't have the answer there, but that's my kind of thought, but I agree entirely.
So is it easy to deal with images?
Yes. So you can add images to Sphinx sites, and it will compile them all and put them in a static folder, and then you just configure the static folder to serve as normal. So you'd know where those static files were going to end up, and in static dirs you'd add that extra configuration. That's a good point. I should add that to the repo, because that's going to come up. That's going to come up again and again, isn't it? But yes, Sphinx takes the static files that you add to the Sphinx projects and it puts them all in one folder for you.
Carlton, as far as really complex layouts and presentation are concerned, I guess then it doesn't matter, because as long as you can present it through Sphinx in a reasonably structured way, then Django can do all of the clever things with it, including the kind of front-end layers for presenting it interactively. So it takes the layer that where you'd be doing things in, say, a Django CMS interface for some kind of interactive thing. It would just be in the Markdown or whatever structure within Sphinx. And that becomes very lightweight then, doesn't it? Very fast and powerful. Yeah, sorry, it's not.
No.
I'm just wondering how far you've taken this to demonstrate that kind of thing.
So I've taken it as far as, one thing I'm very interested in is this kind of tabs example where you have you have the same example for Windows, for Mac, for Linux, and person clicks on which operating system there are and they get the example for them rather than having. And there are Sphinx extensions which do that already, and including using the existing Sphinx extensions. It's very good because you just get the HTML and then you insert the in the Django templating language. You then say, right, I need this static file, and you can adjust it as you want. But when you dig into the source code of these extensions, they're not particularly complicated, right? Then actually, this is quite an easy thing to do, to build a Sphinx extension. And if you knew you were targeting the DTL at the end of it, you wouldn't necessarily have to jump through quite all the hoops to make sure you had the static files in the right place and all the rest. You just generate the HTML that you need to attach onto with your JavaScript or CSS later. So these kind of interactive widgets, they're really doable. The extent to which they're not, then I don't know. You could define a template which would then include another one, which you could then use a Django view to back, and I don't know, start making it up at that point. But what the JSON builder gives you is this nice structure where you've got, here's the page content, here's the table of contents, here's the other additional bits that Sphinx give you, and you can put those anywhere in the template that you like, and that template can be anything you want. So that's why I'm quite excited about it. I think it has lots of potential for doing exciting things. Hope that's an answer.
Absolutely, thanks.
Hi, Carlton.
Hello.
I would like to make a question regarding testing, and actually, is there in the other way? There is a package. There are packages like Factory Boy where you can produce dummy data and do end-to-end testing. It's not so important in static sites, but I would like to ask you if there is an option, or how do you manage testing?
Okay, the way I tend to do it is I'm busy writing my docs with Sphinx, and then I have the watcher, the Sphinx watcher, which will rebuild every time you save a file, and that's there. And then I just have an output of the static site built. And then, what am I testing when I run the test? Well, I'm looking to test, well, did the view render? Did it get the right template? I'm not like literally testing the content of the Sphinx view, if that makes sense. So of the Sphinx doc, that's not the sort of thing I'd unit test, because I just end up sort of copy and pasting the content of the docs into the unit test. So what could go wrong? It could go wrong that it didn't find the right template. So when I put the path in, was it able to correctly pass the data that it got from the URL resolver into the name of the template file or the JSON file that it needs to load? That kind of thing. Does that answer the question? I'm not sure if it does or not.
Yes, of course. So for dummy data, for example, in case where you have 100 of items and you you want to check if pagination or something like that is working. So how do you manage?
Well, then you'd have for this particular. I mean, it's not loading a query set from the database or whatever. So I don't know. I would have, if I needed that sort of thing, I'd have a known output folder. So I'd output it with a known state, and that wouldn't be live. That would live in my test directory as a, as a static, fixed, known state of the JSON, and I would then route the documentation view to that folder rather than, my development one that I'm using all the time.
Okay, thank you.
But I don't have anything like Factory Boy in mind. I just wouldn't do that. I'd just have a fixed rendering, and that would have to do. Now, if you don't ask any more questions, I'm going to go, yeah, that's it. I'm off. I'm going to get a coffee.
Thanks a lot for that. Really, really, really enjoyed the talk, Carlton.
Thank you for saying.
Enjoy your coffee, Carlton. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Paolo. Okay, thank you, everybody.
I'm not sure if you've seen question. I don't know if you've answered already or not.
Oh, no, I haven't seen the question. Oh, yeah, there's a chat box.
Yeah.
Okay. Is the talk deck online anywhere? No, the talk deck is not online anywhere yet, but I can work on that over the course of the rest of the day and see if I can arrange for that to happen. I'm sure it's fairly easy. I think I'll go export PDF, done, I think. We'll see. Okay, let's go and get the other two. See you in the conference, folks. Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you, Carlton.
Bye-bye.